also talks about Eretz Yisrael. And it's the first introduction that we have to Nevi'im in the form of the Haftarah. And the pasuk starts telling us in the Haftarah that He made the world, and that which developed from the world. And which earth, which land am I talking about? The Rebbeinu gives a neshama to the people on that land, and a ruach, also a soul, to those that walk on it. And the Gemara tells us in Ksubis that whoever lives in Eretz Yisrael will have Olam Haba, because it says nice. They will have Olam Haba and will be freed from his avayros. Because nice and neshama la'amal leha v'ruach l'haylechem. But even if you walk 4 steps in Eretz Yisrael, you already are Zaycha to Olam Haba. So the Gemara tells us that this pasuk is referring to Eretz Yisrael. The first word which Rabban Yisrael told Avraham Avinu was go to Eretz Yisrael. The first word which Rabban Yisrael told Yitzchak was don't go out of Eretz Yisrael. The first word which Rabban Yisrael told Avraham Avinu was lech lecha meyartzecha el ha'aretz asher areka. Go to the land which I am going to direct you to, which is Eretz Yisrael. Avraham Avinu is midas hachesed. If we have any love to the Rabban Yisrael, it's because we have it as a Yerusha from Avraham Avinu. Chesed, love to the Rabbeinu Shalom. Or the mitzvahs, the commandments, which are positive mitzvahs to do, is because we love the Rabbeinu Shalom. So Avraham Avinu was given the mitzvah of going to Eretz Yisrael in the form of a mitzvah sasei. The first word Hashem told Yitzchak was Al Tayret Mitzrayim, go ba'aretz hazayis. Don't go to Mitzrayim, rather be in this land. Yitzchak, Avraham Avinu, the Rabban Shalom started talking to him in the form of a lecha. In other words, don't leave Eretz Yisrael. Not do, but don't. He is the source of all the lecha. He's midas hadin. The first word that Hashem Yisbarach told the Yankov Avinu was referring to Eretz Yisrael. At the first, when he had that dream at the site of the Beis HaMikdash, so Hashem said, I am Hashem, your God, God of your fathers. The land that you are lying upon, I am going to give it to you and to your children. So this is the first. So there's one first land and there's one first person. And the first person, Avraham Avinu, belongs to the first land. The person of Bereishis belongs in the land of Bereishis. And that's what our Sedra tells us today. So when Avraham Avinu left Eretz Yisrael, because of the hunger which is described in the beginning of lech lecha, and he went to Mitzrayim, so Sarah found herself detained, being kept by Parai. And the Ramban says that Avraham Avinu did a big sin by going to Mitzrayim. Firstly, why did he go to Mitzrayim? Secondly, why did he subject Sarah to Parai and his court? Why did he say things which caused Parai to think that this is his sister rather than his wife, and Parai was entertaining thoughts of marrying Sarah, and she was quite in danger of it, if not for the fact that Hashem protected her, and Parai was inflicted with makais, with plagues. So, but why did Avraham Avinu endanger Sarah by allowing her to go to Paray. So the Ramban says that because of that, he suffered in the form of his children who had to go down to the Galus in Mitzrayim. And being that the sin was in Mitzrayim, so the punishment was also in Mitzrayim. This Ramban is a rather puzzling Ramban. The Ramban couldn't find a good word for Avraham Avinu. You know, that Avraham went to Mitzrayim, and the first thing that Avraham Avinu does when he comes to Eretz Yisrael is to do a big sin. Chet Gadol Chata Avraham Avinu. Rabbeinu Yaina in the Shari Tshuva tells us that even though it says Havidanas Kaladam Lekaf Schus, you should always judge a person by to merit, and always give him the benefit of the doubt. You see somebody doing something which is questionable. It may be an aveira, may not be an aveira. Give him the benefit of the doubt. Say to yourself, well, he certainly is not doing any aveira. I do not accept the fact, I do not believe that this person is doing an aveira. Beim don lekavschus. But that's only within reasonable limits, if it makes sense. But that's by an average person. However, somebody who has a reputation as a tzaddik, it's not. You have to go all the way out, even if it's not reasonable, even if it's going to extremes. Always try to think that he really didn't do an aveira. You should be done a tzaddik lekaf schus to a much greater degree than you do an ordinary person. That's how Rabbeinu Yaina paskins. Now, certainly, Avraham Avinu was a tzaddik. Why does the Ramban criticize Avraham Avinu and says that he did an aveira? He couldn't find a good reason for Avraham Avinu going to Mitzrayim and for Sarah being allowed to enter the court of Paray and without any resistance from Avraham Avinu. I could find a person Avraham Avinu. Why couldn't the Ramban? If the time will allow, I'm going to tell you what I think about Avraham Avinu. But so why couldn't the Ramban think about a good reason for Avraham Avinu doing this? He puts him, and Avraham Avinu is put down as somebody who did a sin, and the Ramban's Sefer is an eternal Sefer, hundreds and hundreds of years already that we have the Ramban, and every year thousands upon thousands upon thousands of Jews learn when they come to parsha lecha that Avraham Avinu did a sin. Now, the Maharal, you certainly, I suppose, heard of the Maharal. We know of the Maharal as creating a gailam, creating a form out of clay in the form of a human being, which was a gailam. And the gailam we usually call a dumb person is called a gailam. But the Maharal did more than creating a gailam. The Maharal actually, his biggest feat was not making a gailam, but making people, transforming gailams into people. He gave us his sfarim, his wonderful sfarim, which teach us very much. They give us, I believe he was probably, if we want to call it Jewish philosophy, he was probably the greatest Jewish philosopher that ever was, the Maharal. And he gives us Jewish thought. So the Maharal explains in one of the Sfarim that the difference between a Jew and a guy is that a Jew is fundamentally a tzaddik as opposed to a guy. And when a Jew does an aveira, it's only on the surface, but it doesn't reach his insides. It isn't because he is internally bad. It's just on the surface. Just like somebody, who fell into the mud, or who, let's say, swept a chimney, so he's black. Now, a black person from Africa can wash himself in soap and water for decades and he'll remain black. But somebody who swept the chimney and is black will just go into a shower with a little warm water and soap. In a jiffy, he'll be white again. So that's how he explains that an aveira by a Yid, by a Jew, is only on the surface. It's b'mikra. It happened. And something which happened by coincidence isn't anything that prevails, isn't anything that's permanent. It'll go away. It's only temporary. However, when a guy does an aveira, it's because of his very nature and the blemish which he causes upon himself, the dark coloring which he colors himself with an aveira is permanent. That's what the Maharal explains. So therefore, a Jew can do tshuva on an aveira. Tshuva is not for goyim. So, in the beginning of this week's Sedra, there is something which needs explanation. And the Mefarshim ask this kasha. Why is it that the Torah doesn't tell us anything about Avraham Avinu before we start talking about Hashem's relation with Avraham Avinu? Last week's Sedra, in contrast, when we see that the Rabbeinu Shalom, after 10 generations, which he just fleetingly passed through, stops by Noach, and we have an entire Sedra about Noach. So the first pasuk in the Sedra tells us why Hashem favored Noach. Eila toiladus Noach. Noach is tzaddik. Tamim hayavadaraisa. V'so elikim esalich Noach. Noach was a tzaddik, a righteous person. Therefore, Hashem bestowed favor upon him, and he saved him from the Mabel while others suffered. By Avraham Avinu, in this week's Sedra, after going through the 10 generations from Noach to Avraham, and Hashem stopping by Avraham, the Torah does not introduce Avraham Avinu and the reason why he found favor by Hashem. The pasuk doesn't start, Eila told us Avraham ish tzaddik. The pasuk starts immediately. Vayomer Hashem al Avram, lech lecha meyatzecha. Hashem said to Avram, "Go to your land, go to Eretz Yisrael, and I'm going to make you a large nation, and I'm going to bless you, and your name will be great, and you will be a source of blessing." That's what Hashem tells Avraham Avinu. Why? Why did he deserve it? Was he a tzaddik? Why doesn't the Torah tell us? Avraham Avinu actually did have a history of tzidkus at this point, because as the Midrashim tell us, he already had his encounters with Nimrod and the king who declared himself a god, and Avraham Avinu defied him, and he said, "No, you're not a god, because there's one God who created heaven and earth, that's Hashem." And Avraham Avinu understood that there's one God, and he worshipped God and preached the presence and the existence of God, even though he endangered himself by doing so, by inciting the wrath of Nimrod upon him. And Nimrod actually threw him into the fire. And then Hashem made a ness, he made a miracle. And the fire did not harm Avraham Avinu at all. And he emerged from the fire without any without any harm at all to his body. And then Avraham Avinu, then Hashem introduced himself to Avraham Avinu, and he said, "Anihu Bal Abir, I am the maker of the world. This maker that you and